Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, this past weekend we saw the shift in temperatures that we've been anticipating, with a lot of this cooler air that was here over the south over the last weeks finally starting to exit as we got through Easter weekend, and a major warm-up that occurred here starting in the Central Plains. Again, the map we're looking at here is just the last 7 days of temperature anomalies. We're just comparing things to normal, and I want to start off today with a discussion about temperatures. We're going to go straight to looking at what our maximum temperatures are going to look like over the next week from this morning's National Digital Forecast Database run. So what you've got here is Monday's high temperatures, and again, the color shading tells you the departure from normal. So very, very warm conditions in the Central Plains of the United States, heading toward the upper Midwest. As we slide through this week, what we're going to watch is a system coming out of the Central Plains. Yeah, we'll be talking about snow in parts of western South Dakota, Wyoming, and western Nebraska here. But this cold shot of air that comes through, just watch it. It doesn't live too long there. This is Wednesday's high temperatures. Then we get into Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. What you notice is that as we work our way through the remainder of this week, we are just not seeing cold air getting anchored in any given spot. But what we're concerned about this time of year is frost. So let's give this a quick discussion. So this is Monday's minimum temperatures here, again, compared to normal. And just remember that when I make these animations, so here we go into Tuesday and Wednesday, it's kind of hard to see sometimes, but there's a white contour. See it there? I made it white instead of black because sometimes the black kind of disrupts the numbers. But that white contour that you see there represents my freezing line. So as we go through Wednesday into Thursday, Friday, this is now Saturday and Sunday, we're just trying to see the extent of any air that is colder than normal. Okay, from there, I want to show you what the upper level pattern's doing, because we just saw that this week that the coldest air is really confined to very limited places here across North America. So what we're going to watch here is we're going to watch for any troughs that get anchored to truly cold air that's over the Arctic. And what I mean by that is if you see a large, blue region that extends deep into North America, then we've anchored the cold air and we'll get a deep frost. So what we're going to watch this week as we go through Monday and Tuesday is there are a couple of shortwaves to be paying attention to. The first one here that cuts up into the Hudson Bay, it'll linger a front in the upper Midwest. We're going to watch for storms out of that one. Then the deeper trough that cuts out of parts of Idaho into Wyoming, you can see here getting into the western plains. This is the one that we're going to watch early this week for initiating a low that's going to bring in a temporary shot at some cold air. But it wraps too up into the upper Midwest here in the Great Lakes Basin by Thursday. But you can kind of tell what's going on here. There's 1, 2, 3 troughs, the deepest of which is over Alaska, and broad ridging here extending from the Hudson Bay area into New England. And now what we're overall seeing, though, is generally higher heights here in this region. And that's what I want to make sure that we understand. Because as the pattern continues to evolve, when we go into the weekend, we keep seeing these troughs ejecting, over the mountains, coming along the U.S.-Canada border, and then sweeping through the United States. What we don't see in any of the model runs are these troughs of colder air really deeply connected to some really cold air farther to the north. And as I just take this all the way out, I don't know, let's go out to about day 10. This is what we see. The models are not allowing for or not showing in the forecast any long-term sustained cold air getting far to the south as we work our way toward the middle of this month. And we'll take a look at the end of the month in just a few moments, but let's get at least through the next 10 days. So in light of seeing that, let's just go over the next day 5 through day 10 time period. So again, where we see the deepest troughs here in Alaska, that is where our coldest air tends to be. And with the ridging that's happening here over the Hudson Bay, that's where we're getting our most mild conditions. So could the Pacific Northwest, could parts of the Canadian Prairie get at times a couple of shots at some cooler air? Yes, that's certainly in the mix here. But we're not really talking about, brutally cold April weather unless you're in this part of Alaska. So that's important to see here through the first 10 days of the month of April. Now, is the European in agreement with this? Yeah, for the most part it is. You can see that there is some cooler air there, and they're trying to let out some cold air at times through the next 10 days that does, very briefly make it into the Central Plains. But that's the case here. It's a brief shot at colder air, nothing that's truly becoming established. So I decided to make a couple of different maps for us this morning. We're going to look at these carefully over the next several weeks as we work our way, especially for the midsection of the country, into the spring planting time period. Now, what is it? It's the extent of the surface subfreezing temperatures. So if you see gray, over the next 10 days, the European model has a 2-meter temperature, 6-foot temperature that is below freezing. All right, and we can see that that's largely confined, to the north and west of that line. So if you are in the white shading on this graphic, that means that the European model is at this point not seeing a subfreezing temperature over the next 10 days. All right. Now we need to do the same thing for the GFS, and notice the difference here. Ready? This is the European. This is the GFS. You notice how it's a bit farther, back to the north and to the west that it moved that line. I can show you the difference again. This is the GFS, European, GFS, and European. And yes, the models have different resolution. That's why there's a little bit more crisp of a view from the European than it is from the GFS. But the idea here is that we are not seeing, like we saw last week, where we had frost, making it way far down here to the south and even over to the Carolinas. It seems as though that colder air has retreated. Now, I just wanted to get those first 10 days out there and talked about, because that's critical in terms of what we're going to be doing in the midsection of the country. The other part of this is going to be dealing with precipitation. So, first wave here, it's going to be heading up toward the Hudson Bay. The second wave here is going to come out in the plains and then move into the upper Midwest. But you still see the stronger flow coming over in this direction. And despite getting motion like this coming to California, we're not returning the precipitation. And I'll say something. If you just kind of follow one last arrow here, that's where the main piece of the jet stream coming across North America sits right now. And this is what's also opened up the Gulf of Mexico and brought in a lot of that warmth. And because of that, over the next 3 days, we're going to watch a few different areas for severe storms. There's a lingering frontal boundary right here out ahead of that next upper level low that's going to be moving out of this area and coming up like this just over the next 24 hours. So parts of the upper Midwest in Minnesota, Wisconsin, really right through this line here into this area, we could be watching for some stronger storms today. But then as this low emerges, you're going to see that tomorrow on the 6th, our concentration is going to be down here in parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri for watching some strong to severe storms. And then as we work our way into Wednesday, the 7th, we're going to see that as that low fully emerges and starts to race here toward, Wisconsin, that the frontal boundary, as it slides through parts of the Mid-South and the lower Mississippi River Valley, we're going to target this area for the potential for strong and severe storms. Let's take a look at it on our high-resolution maps here. Now, the weekend was very dry, and the end of it here on Sunday was as well. But as we get here into early Monday morning hours, we're just going to watch. Got a few showers that could be moving through parts of the Midwest and the Great Lakes Basin, but our next storm system is sitting here, all right? So as we play this forward, you see those showers moving through parts of Michigan, getting over to maybe Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania. Main show is on the back side here, though. There's a frontal boundary sitting right in here, and it is connected to this low that is forming right in this area. And as I take those drawings off there and play this forward, you can see that throughout this evening and the overnight hours, this will just be where we're going to watch for some of those storms. Now, after that, the next system pulls out of parts of Wyoming. This is now 1 p.m. on Tuesday. We're kind of moving pretty quickly here. And we see that this is going to put moisture back into parts of South Dakota. Unfortunately, that's in the form of snow on the western side. We could get some snow on parts of the high plains of Colorado and Nebraska as well. And as this low comes out here, our concern is going to be farther to the south in this area. Again, this is going to be the Wednesday overnight time period. We could be seeing some strong to severe storms into this region. And as we let this, the Tuesday night time frame, we're going to see that. And then by Wednesday, the main system has now emerged here in the Western Corn Belt, and we're going to watch it on the European model to see where it goes from there. So we've got up to about right here, okay? This is now Wednesday, 7 a.m. Let's work our way through the day on Wednesday and that low as it curls up right here over the state of Iowa. Now, question is, do we bring moisture back to the Red River Valley, or does it stay east? And as we get more of this moisture into the upper Midwest, which is great, we need it there at this time, how much are we talking about? We're going to watch this area in through here for the stronger storms, because the Gulf of Mexico is open at this point and returning that moisture and heat along with it. As we work our way in through Thursday, that low takes a while as it spins and moves towards Wisconsin here to get out. Nothing really moving it quickly out of the way. So this is now Friday at 1 p.m. And by the way, this we'll probably see a translation of that severe storm threat out of the lower Mississippi River Valley over into parts of the southeast as we get into the day on Friday. Now that low attempts to curl its way up into parts, of Ontario. And on the weekend, you can see the lingering frontal boundary might initiate more showers and storms down here for parts of the Mid-South, getting into the lower Mississippi River Valley. And down there, I know there's a lot of folks that could use more time here to dry out before these storms return to this area. And again, this is Saturday morning is what we're looking at here. As we then get into the weekend, this upcoming weekend, that system finally starts to move out. But as I said, there was a few other upper-level disturbances behind it, and the next one comes into parts here of the Dakotas. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty on this, but we're going to watch the Dakotas carefully given the drier conditions there. So anytime I see a system coming in like this, potentially increasing precipitation chances, especially in North Dakota where things are so very dry, I'm going to watch it carefully. So please, let's keep an eye on this together as we work our way throughout the rest of this week. But I'm going to stop it right here at the 1-week forecast, and let's just take a look at total accumulated precipitation. Now, this is through Saturday evening, but if we rock this back, we can kind of see the timing of this precipitation. So this is coming through Monday, now through the day on Tuesday. That's by Tuesday evening. We're going to get out here at about Wednesday evening into the overnight hours. And then let's work our way through the end of this week as that low. I mean, it just takes forever to curl itself up here, disconnected from the main flow. And this is how much precip we're expecting to see here by the time we get through the next 7 days. Now, oftentimes it's better to look at this by comparing it to normal. So this, again, is precipitation anomalies. And I was really keyed in on parts of the Dakotas, the Red River Valley of the North here. You see a lot of that precip is going to be to the east, according to the current model run. But to see wetter conditions in through these areas, just remember, this is an area that over the last 10 to 15 days has been extremely wet. And so we're going to continue to see issues there. Meanwhile, in the west, we just don't have the direct flow that we would want for California and Oregon to increase the precipitation. And that's why we continue to see the drier conditions there. The GFS model, is it similar? There are some similarities here. You do see the upper Midwest is a main focus, and the same corridor that we just identified potentially having more precipitation. But if I rock back and forth, again, this is the European next week, and this is the GFS. You can see the Europeans keened in on quite a bit more thunderstorm activity in this area than the GFS has at this point. But they both are drier here along the west coast of the United States. All right, from there, let's move on and take a look now at week 2. And we see out here from the European model what week 2 is currently looking like. There's a chance we could get more activity down here in parts of the southern plains, but the European's wet up the east coast. Now, if we take a look at maybe what's going on there, excuse me, this again comes back to what the upper level flow looks like. And I'm going to show you the GFS. Remember, we had that large ridge in place here. And the GFS drops a trough right into this area. And therefore that trough would eject into the southern plains, and therefore it would set up this area right in through here for having quite a bit of severe weather activity. What's the main difference here? Well, when you look now at what the GFS does, you can see that that's the area that it is most keen. I can almost make like a D shape out of it there. It's most keen on having the severe storms and also a quite active pattern. Going back here just quickly though, do you notice how the European was wetter farther to the east? One of the main differences here is that the European is much more progressive with this trough that you see right here, diving it down into the eastern side of North America. And that's why it's got things, wetter in that area compared to the GFS, which is drier, as you can see. What does it do to temperatures? Well, the fact that we're moving systems through, the GFS says, well, if we're going to put storms in here, there's going to be clouds. And therefore, you've got some cooler conditions in that area. But this is cooler compared to what we would get, in mid-April. So it's still warm. This isn't a signal for cold weather. And if we just go from there over to what the European says, remember, it's trying to be more, advance that trough much farther to the east. So it's got a cooler pocket in place here. We're talking 3, 4, 5 degrees colder than normal. But look, to the north, to the west, what's it anchored to? It's not anchored to anything that could bring in, a late freeze at this point. I don't see that happening through mid-month. There's too much cold air tucked away in Alaska for that. And there's another side of this story here as we start to wrap this up. It's the MJO. So we start to look, we've looked at the jet stream pattern across the northern hemisphere here. What are the tropics saying? That's what the MJO is going to tell us. Well, you can see that it's going to just move here through phases 6, 7, and 8. And our questions are, does it dive down here? And the reason why you want to know that is because if we get down into phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3, that transition through these phase 1 through 4, that transition is a signal for colder air across North America. And last Friday's long-range European model, this goes out 45 days. I mean, this is out to May 2nd. I'm just going to draw a line. Do you see how the forecast, which is all these squiggly like spaghetti lines you see here, they're just trying to keep the MJO away from, well, the Indian Ocean. And if that occurs, this is a signal that the tropics are not going to be supportive of a better establishment of colder air. So we've looked at the extratropics, the jet stream in the Pacific. We looked at the ridge over Greenland. And we look at this. And so my story is, well, to be honest, it just kind of comes back to a few of these graphics we looked at earlier, specifically the temperature pattern in Alaska, and then what this might mean to our frost freeze situation, right? And so we see this again. Do we extend this into, for example, the Eastern Corn Belt, the Mid-South, or the Southern Plains? I just don't see it happening through the middle of this month. So let's just go out there and look beyond this. We're going to look two ways. This is the third week of April, so April 20 through the 27th. And the flow pattern generally drops a trough here in the Gulf of Alaska. There's a bit of ridging here in the heights. You can just kind of barely see it there looking at the colors. But the flow is generally doing something a bit like this. Now, if you remember, I know this is the end of April, but early May, we had a deep frost that got into the Eastern Corn Belt. Well, when that happened, there was a very, very deep trough here that brought that freeze into the Eastern Corn Belt. And the models just aren't advertising it at this point. But this also isn't the kind of pattern that at the end of the month would signal, like a really, really hot end of April here east of the Rocky Mountains. So we can take that and say, okay, well, what do the temperature patterns look like? The models have continued at some point in April to keep some cooler conditions here. How cool? Well, there's no strong signal of deep Arctic air, but just a cooler signal and not necessarily making it overly warm in this area. And you do see warmth south of this area where the ridge was sitting. What about precipitation? Well, the models are not really picking up well on what we expect to be more active severe weather in this area. They're not designed to do that. And with the one trough here and the second trough there, that's just where they've got the wetter conditions currently. There's a lot that can evolve as we get out here to the third week of April. My main story with this is that I don't see the right combination of events setting up right now to bring in deep, sustained cold air. And my point in telling everyone that is that, especially for those east of the Rocky Mountains that are going aggressively after this next crop, we just got to watch this in a 10-day chunk to keep an eye on those temperatures, because if they stay on the mild side of things, we could have a very rapid plant. There's one last thing in terms of temperatures I want to talk about, and it's the ocean temperatures. Now, when you look right now, we continue to see that negative PMM pattern. That's the cooler water here, all right? This area here in the Gulf of Alaska over the last week has even gotten a little bit cooler. And we're still quite warm in the North Atlantic, although things have cooled down a little bit here compared to what they were. That's still showing up warm. You might be saying, well, I'm starting to now see some cold water coming right back here into where we watch for La Nina. And what I want to show you is that despite that, just notice that beneath the surface, okay, there's a lot of warm water still in place here that's going to come up. So what are you looking at? Well, over here, this is South America, and this is Australia over here on this side, and the line connecting the two right here would be the top of the Pacific Ocean, the sea surface. This is going down. And so what's going on in this particular shot here is this is the last little bit of cooler water emerging. And there's some warmer water that is underneath this. But this is not going to be the resurgence of a big El Nino event. That's not what they typically look like. So don't think we're going into El Nino immediately. This is just the change in the ocean temperatures we're going to be watching carefully. So I'll finish with this yet again. this is the area that if you are east of the Rocky Mountains, I want you to be watching carefully. If over the next 45 days this remains cooler, this increases our risk of summer heat and drought here. For the west, if this stays cooler, this decreases the risk of summer drought and heat, and therefore wildfires in the west, despite the fact that right now we do have an extensive amount of drought in the west. So we're going to watch this all week long, and these temperature maps are going to be critical to the progress of us planting the crop. And also, we'll just keep you updated on each one of these storm systems that comes through to see how things evolve too. Okay, I appreciate your attention this morning. You all have a great rest of your day and week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.